All right, you guys are going to get a kick out of this. So, Stephen Miller is a former top Trump advisor, and his wheelhouse was immigration. In fact, I think he's the guy who crafted the family separation policy. It was either that one or a different, like, very hardline Trump policy. And he's a terrifying dude because he seems to be a true Kool-Aid drinking ideologue, and his big thing is like, fuck the immigrants. So here we have a recording of him, and it's him discussing what Trump is going to do in a second term. And there's already been, I mean, we covered some of his immigration plans, and a lot of it is not constitutional and goes way too far. I know he wants to do like ideological screening of immigrants, which is like, that's not a thing. You can't just like litmus test their politics and then decide I'm going to kick out you guys. I'm going to not allow in any Marxists. No Marxists allowed. Of course, war with Mexico was a big thing that was being floated, how they want to, basically start doing airstrikes on the cartels. And this would be without the agreement of AMLO and the Mexican government, which again is wildly illegal. But here's another thing that he just floated. And this one really got my attention because I hadn't heard this one yet. And this would be a disaster. Listen.
The only other detail I'll add to this, and I could obviously talk about it for, an hour, but is that President Trump has also said that he would invoke a statute that's been on the books since the John Adams administration, which allows you to deport any alien aged 14 or older without due process if there's a declared state of incursion, a predatory incursion or invasion from that country. So this is an extremely powerful tool that waives due process. And so that would be an additional authority that you'd be able to use to expedite these removals.
So in other words, they want to define what's happening with immigrants as an incursion or an invasion, and then scrap due process and deport everybody over the age of 14. That is wild. So they did something, if you think, well, no, they can't actually, they wouldn't go that far. They actually did something similar to that, and Biden even kept it in place for a while. During the pandemic, they decided, we're going to basically declare an emergency and have no due process and deport people right away. Say, hey, we got a pandemic going on in here. You can't come in here, and just skip the whole process, kick them right out. And that was in place for a while. That's a little bit of a different situation because it turns out they're actually, the pandemic actually was an emergency. So I think legally speaking, they were on more sound ground. But for this one, what you're talking about here is mass deportation of millions and millions of people. Millions of people. It's almost like, look, we're recycling again everything that happened in 2016, right? The anti-immigrant rhetoric. And now we're back in that position, except it's on steroids and human growth hormone, right? It's gone way over the top with it and getting super extreme. I mean, again, I keep bringing this fact up, and I think more people should. Trump's officials are discussing invoking the Insurrection Act on day one as president just because they don't want to see any protests against him. Remember, back in 2017, they had the Women's March. That was when Trump was in office. The Women's March was the backlash, and Trump hated the optics of people protesting him so early in his administration. And, they let it go, but this time they're saying if there's going to be mass mobilization and protests, let's just invoke the Insurrection Act and deploy the U.S. military on the streets to quote-unquote keep order. Really, it's unconstitutionally taking away people's First Amendment rights, but they would define it as just keeping order. And there's another thing. I don't agree with the people on the Democratic side who are what I would call institution humpers. The idea that like our institutions are so pure and so good and so just in every way, and that's why you need to follow the rules and all that stuff. And because I think in many ways a lot of our institutions are broken. But when it comes to Trump and his people, they literally, any institutions at all are like, they just get in his way. The rules, due process, they just have a seething hatred for rule of law. And this would be flouting rule of law and invoking this extreme statute. I'm sure this would be tried in court, but who knows how our right-wing courts would rule. They might rule that it's okay. But just like that, due process, out the window, and you have mass deportation. So they're just getting warmed up, man. They're just getting warmed up. If you're unaware of just how extreme a second term would be, go look up Project 2025. You have hundreds of right-wing think tanks who have incredibly detailed plans as to what they're going to do the second Trump gets back in office. And the bottom line is, it is completely and utterly obliterating the administrative state. Every single agency you could think of that does regulation, just gone, done. You know, they want to gut the EPA 1,000 ways to Sunday. That is probably one of the top things on their list. Any sort of career bureaucrats who do important work, they want to gut them, and they want to replace them with conservative ideologues. And that would be an utter disaster. So, I mean, they're warning us how extreme it would be, and unfortunately the Democrats aren't taking it anywhere near seriously enough. And Biden's floundering in the polls massively. And it's just dangerous because these are your opponents. And your opponents are not messing around, and they're ready to start doing some very, very extreme things. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.